join me as we talk all things true crime.
Made contact and shattered.
The missing 4-year-old. The parents have called in and the mother has went through a wall, came home, now they can't find her.
Chad, where are Lori's kids? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say?
4 were stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep during the attack. Some had defensive wounds.
Most of them had just like one that was the lethal stab wound.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Once I told a lie, and I told my family, I had to keep lying.
What's your, is it deemed?
We haven't cleared anybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We are going to be discussing the Karen Read trial. In case you guys didn't hear, the jurors have gone home for the evening. I've heard and I read that the judge slipped the jury a note asking if they'd like to go home, and they said yes. So we are here waiting for them to return tomorrow. Let me know also. Okay, good. My sound guy, Johnny, says the sound is good and the video. Thank you. And hello to all my moderators. Delana, Bean Bio Girl, hope you're healing up well. Carol freaking Claus is here. Dustin, Pointer Lover. Awesome, guys. Thank you guys for joining. I did invite a few guests on tonight, but I haven't heard back from them. Hi, Zoe. Tony, Joey Brooklyn, good to see you. Let's see if they got back to me. So looks like you're stuck with me for tonight. They might be able to join me on another stream discussing this. We are all on different time zones. So 2 out of the 4 people I invited are on West Coast time. So they might be doing dinner or something else. And hello, yeah, let's unpack that. Paul T, good to see you guys. Let's start off with a little recap of the case. It's only like a minute long, just to give us a little background. It isn't clips that I put together. This is just from a court TV segment. So let me just play this for a minute.
They show up wearing pink, some of them holding signs. They line the streets cheering on a woman named Karen Read. Karen Read's not a celebrity. She's not a war hero. Karen is a college professor accused of murdering a Boston police officer named John O'Keefe. John and Karen were a couple who were practically living together. But on the night of January 28th, going into the early mornings of the 29th, they were out together. First at C.F. McCarthy's in downtown Canton, Massachusetts, then at the Waterfall Bar and Grill, and finally inside Karen's SUV in front of Brian Albert's house, who was having an after party with a bunch of the folks who were at the Waterfall. The big question is, what happened to John O'Keefe after he stepped out of Karen's car? Prosecutors say she backed over him on purpose and drove away, leaving him in the snow to die. Karen says that is not true and believes John went into the party, got ambushed, and was placed onto the front yard to die in the cold. She also believes the people in the house, along with state and local police, framed her for John's murder. The defense has now rested their case. What did their experts prove to the jury, and how much is riding on tomorrow's closing arguments? We'll break it all down as we continue our investigation into the tragic death of Officer John O'Keefe.
All right, and the closing arguments, for as many of you guys know, happened today. I'm curious of those in chat, who watched the closing arguments? I know, Dustin, and the Commonwealth didn't really lay out the best picture of, in theory, an idea of what took place here. Tony says, I feel we may never know the truth about this case, in my opinion. I agree. And I felt I was hoping that we would get more answers, throughout these weeks of trial. And I feel like I'm still kind of at this crossroads where I don't believe the Commonwealth's theory, and I'm not 100% in line with the defense's theory, but I feel like the truth lies closer with the defense. That's just my opinion. Let me just also switch up my screen. I did want to share a few things. And hello, Amanda S. Vita. Good to see you. I just played a little recap of the case. So in case you're not really up to speed, it kind of gave us a little background. So this I seen in a Facebook group. I just wanted to share it because this is who this case is about. And this is the person that we're supposed to be seeking justice for. I know that there's been a lot of justice for Karen Read. Her constitutional rights are being trampled on. And I understand all that. And I respect, the fight and crusade for her. But I do feel like, sadly, this case, the person who's supposed to really be the center of it is John O'Keefe. This is his high school picture, class of 94. I just want to bring it back to the victim for a second. And hello, Roxanne. Good to see you. And thank you so much for the Cash App, buying me my cravings. I appreciate you. And hello, Debbie Fox. Good to see you. I am drinking coconut water. It's really good. So I just thought this was a cute picture of John, obviously young, had a lot ahead of him. And it's crazy when you look at pictures of victims when they're younger and what happens to them later in life. It's just sort of surreal for me, at least when I research these cases. Just looking at John, it's like he doesn't know, at this point in his life that someday people are not going to know what happened to him on the night he died. And those who do know are keeping it a secret. And then there was another post I wanted to share as well to kind of bring it back to John. All right. I don't know why they used an AI photo, but I thought the message was good. Never lose sight of that a life was lost. John O'Keefe is gone. We make some jokes. We point out the absurdity and many things and the people surrounding this case, of many things and people surrounding this case. So many sideshows, unanswered questions, things do not add up, and characters involved. But we haven't lost sight of the fact that a Boston police officer lost his life. Justice for John, it will arrive. So I also wanted to share that. Now, let me check chat who had seen the closing out arguments. Hi, Jamie. Good to see you. Thank you, Paul. I try my best. I think the cops are hiding everything, and unfortunately, John O'Keefe won't get the justice he absolutely deserves. I feel John will never get justice. Poor Karen has not been able to even mourn him properly. I feel like John is by her side throughout this nightmare, and he will rest in peace when she's acquitted. And I'm hearing that the family very much is still on board with her being guilty. I don't know that 100%. And hello, US. It's good to see you. But that's what I'm hearing. Again, it's only through the grapevine. Okay, you watched closing. Jackson did amazing. Okay, good. Oh, thank you, Delana. Appreciate it. I feel bad for John and his family as well as Karen. Yeah, me too. There's just a lot to kind of handle. So I don't want to play the whole closing. I will play a little bit of both of them though. But what I also want to do is kind of focus on some things that I have questions on. This specifically, for those who didn't know this, okay, Tony never watched it. Perfect. So then when I play this stuff, it'll kind of be new to you and for me, because I didn't watch it all. So this is something that the prosecution showed, and my whole thing, for those who don't know, they pulled a piece of John's hair from the bumper area of Karen's car, And looking at the photo, I mean, I'm just very confused how a hair was still on there after the snow on the left side of the picture, melted and all that. So I'm not saying that they planted the hair, but I do have questions and I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts? And if you guys haven't hit that thumbs up, if you could just do that, I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, Lally ran out of time. That's all we should need to know. Yes. And again, I guess an hour for each of them for the magnitude of this case, people are saying like that's not really a lot of time. But he should have managed it a little bit better. And just like everything else that the Commonwealth have sort of presented in this case, it's kind of like it leaves you still scratching your head. Like there were times where the Commonwealth was cross examining their own witnesses and all that. And I was like, where is he going with this? Like, what is the point of this questionnaire to me? I just never knew what his whole plan was sometimes, Lally, I mean. Also, there were times where he put, you took the words right out of my mouth, being bio girl. I would watch in the afternoon and I was literally dozing. And I'm like, I'm interested in this trial. Like, I don't want to doze, but like this guy is just so boring. There was times I would have rather watched the ceiling fan that they play when they're on break than listen to Lally. And I'm like, this is just too much. Too much. Delana says, I don't think it should have been timed, in my opinion. And another thing too, hold on, let me flip up. So the whole thing about this hair is questionable to me. So I wanted to share that. There was something else I wanted to share as well. Not that. Oh, obviously this, but give me a second. Well, no, let me pull this up. So this is Colin Alberts. Also was at that party that night at the house. I feel like if I'm coming up with my own theory, Colin is somewhere in this theory. He was very short in his testimony. There were a lot of times he was like, I don't remember. He had a lawyer as well. He hired a lawyer. I know, Delana. She says, I literally have so many questions. Yes, Lally is boring. And if we felt that way, yeah, oh my gosh, yes. Thank you for bringing this up. No blood on the tailgate parts or, yeah, like the tail light. So this whole Commonwealth theory is, oh, he was hit and his head hit this tail light. There's no blood. They never found any blood. The only thing they found was that piece of hair and some glass. And, obviously the defense experts are saying like there's no, evidence that this was a vehicle accident. And I'd have to agree. I mean, a lot of what the Commonwealth was relying on. Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm going to play this clip too. The scars on his knuckles don't add up. No, they do not. And for those guys or even women who have been in a fight, I mean, or sometimes, if guys, I only say guys because I've only seen it firsthand from men, punch a door or a wall. I mean, your knuckles obviously get cut up. So keep that in mind when I play this clip. But another thing that the Commonwealth was really hanging their hat on in their theory and in their process of, claiming this was a car accident was the fact that John's shoe was off, which is typical for a lot of vehicle accidents with pedestrians. Their shoes fly off. And one of them was on, one of them was off, but they were hanging their hat on it. Like, it's like, oh, see, this is proof. This is proof. Like, there's many other theories and situations that could take place where he would have lost his shoe. That's my opinion. Yes, Duty Ron and Ed Wallace had a really good stream last night. And obviously, Ed's experience in crime scene analysis, um, it comes into play when we're listening to his opinion and looking at this, how this case was handled. And it's too much. It has to be the worst forensic investigation in police history. Right. And here we have John, his spirit, can it rest without us knowing the truth? Like, does he know where that everyone's like, flabbergasted at what happened? It's sad to me. It's really sad. Tony doesn't think the injuries were from a vehicle accident. It just doesn't really make sense. It really doesn't. Yes, Higgins did have a Jeep with a plow. And the thing about Higgins that really bothers me is he, during his testimony, talks about how he had to go down to the police office, to the station that night to move vehicles. And he says something along the lines of, I'm sure it's on camera. And it's like, oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for, giving us that information. Sort of convenient that you're offering that you'll be seen on camera doing what you said you're doing on the night that this horrible crime or accident takes place, because it's almost as if he wanted to be seen on camera as part of his alibi. Now, where he comes in with the whole alleged fight that took place, I don't know. I feel more so that there's something to do with Colin here, but Higgins is not off the radar for me. So let's play this. It's only 1 minute and 45 seconds. It's obviously a couple weeks old from when Colin Albert was on the stand. So this is sort of like a recap, but parts of the trial that stuck out, this is definitely one of them for me.
From the moment Colin Albert stepped back on the witness stand, defense attorney Alan Jackson was confrontational.
Do you remember anything about this case?
Jackson showed a picture of Albert taken less than a month after John O'Keefe's death with bruises on his knuckles. The defense has said O'Keefe was killed during a fight. Albert said he got hurt when he slipped on a driveway.
And you injured your right fist, just the top of the knuckles on your right fist when you fell down.
Correct.
Seriously?
The defense also played social media videos of Albert making profanity-laced comments to other teens while in high school.
Was that a threat?
Yes.
The prosecutor called it a juvenile beef about girls. Albert said he'd never actually been in a fight, except maybe with his brothers. Jackson then asked about Albert's ties to Trooper Michael Proctor, whom Albert knows through his family, and who Jackson suggested gave the Alberts preferential treatment.
Was it antagonistic or confrontational?
Can you use different words, please?
Sure. Was he being mean?
No.
Okay.
Colin, do you want to say what it was like for you today?
Albert left after more than 2 hours of cross-examination, during which he was asked not once about the night of O'Keefe's death.
This has turned into the defense of the Alberts rather than the prosecution of Karen Read.
No one other than Karen Read has ever been charged in connection with this case. Tomorrow we expect to hear from...
So again, the wounds on the knuckles from falling on the driveway, just something I didn't really buy. And I don't think that the jury did either. Yes, Scott, that's not the first and only time that during his exam or his cross-examination, he was asked, like, can you rephrase that or use different words? And it was like, part of me was like, is he really this dumb or is he just plain dumb? So that when he says, I don't remember and stuff like that, it just kind of all went together. Yeah, mouthy little poopy head. And for the Commonwealth to say like, oh, those videos that you've seen are just, them joke or playing around and fighting about girls. He seemed unhinged in those videos. We played like a full one on a previous live stream with this case, so you guys would have to go back and look. But I mean, he's like saying things like step up, like stuff like that. And it's like, I don't care like who this is for. This kid seems like a punk. Like, yes, exactly. This kid is a punk and had run ins with John in the past. Yeah, I read something in one of the groups. I don't know if it's true 100%, but I thought it was interesting. Hold on. So somebody posted saying, clearly something happened between John and Colin. Why else would everyone lie about when they left? They want to get their story out that he wasn't there past 12:10, which is proven untrue. If they had lied about when Colin left, if they hadn't lied about when Colin left, no one would have thought much about him being there to celebrate his cousin's birthday. But once they start openly lying about when he left, it starts getting really suspicious. Doesn't help that he has a history with John, and the next day he is showing signs of being in a recent fight. Maybe an accident happened while he was fighting with John. After it happened, the adults sent him home to get him out of there and start building his alibi that he wasn't there. And then somebody wrote in the comment section, because per Canton Confidential, and I haven't vetted this, so if you guys want to and comment down below, John did make a formal complaint to Chief Rafferty about Colin selling drugs. I think it was in the town meeting on August 8th. And somebody wrote, oh, there it is. So I don't know if that's 100% true, but very interesting. And that leads me to, yeah, every voicemail and text on this case was toxic. Agree. Colin's ride home that night, let me just pull this up, also comes into play. And Allison McCabe was his ride home. She gets on the stand. Hold on. I have to pause it once I share the screen. This was an important part too. She is his ride home that night. And how does she start this sentence off?
Colin wasn't at the house, so he's being harassed he was not at the house when John was there, Colin wasn't at the house, so.
Okay, so she's talking about, oh, he's being harassed on the internet because of this case, and it's just so unfair. And then she says something that's like, wait a minute, what? When John was at the house, so John was at the house, and then all of a sudden she breaks into this like, I need a minute, Judge. Oh, I'm so, distraught. He's being harassed. And it was almost like she asked for a minute from the judge so that it would distract against the fact that she sort of slips up by saying when John was at the house. That's just my opinion. Other people have interpreted it differently, and that's fine. All that really matters is how the jury is going to interpret her message if they kind of picked up on it. But I know that social media, when she said this, it was like, did you hear what she said? She said John was at the house, but Colin wasn't there at that same time. So I don't know, it just stuck out to me. So I wanted to add it into the clips of things that kind of stand out to me. And so this is it. Let me play the whole one.
He's being harassed he was not at the house when John was there, so I drove him home. So people are harassing him saying he was at the house when it's not true.
When you speak about harassment, what specifically type of harassment are we
Constant phone calls, emails, awful messages.
As far as you and your family, what, if any, type of harassment have you received?
People showing up at our house, people emailing my school, just like a lot of harassment. Can I have a moment, please? Sure. Colin wasn't at the house, so he's being harassed he was not at the house when John was there, so I drove him home.
Sorry, the fact that she drove him home, if he is involved in this, she might be an accessory after the fact. She might know too much. And I agree, MK. She said, I think Colin slugged John and his parents and cops saved his ass. I think that is a good possibility. So when I say that the truth kind of lies somewhere along the defense's theory and everything, I'm not 100% on board with the defense's story of how everything went, but I think that they kind of sowed the seed of reasonable doubt really well, especially when it comes to Colin and pointing out the pictures of his knuckles and, Jen McCabe, Allie's mother, she has every reason to lie if her daughter is, involved with getting Colin out of this scene that he caused for John's demise. I think it's a possibility. It's the outburst of emotion that lasts a second that makes me suspect. Right. And it's like, to complain about someone else being harassed and get that emotional, I don't know. It's hard because maybe she does have those strong, distraught feelings about him being harassed. It wasn't her being harassed, though. So it was kind of like, okay, are you all right? We were just having a normal conversation here. But then you end up saying that, Colin wasn't at the house when John was there. So John was at the house. I don't know. I just think that whole thing, and like you said, the outburst, it was kind of forced, in my opinion. Yeah, possible Freudian slip. Ed Wallace was furious at the investigation, and the fact that it's for a fellow law enforcement officer. Anybody's death handled this way is wrong, but for them to treat a fellow officer with that disregard, it was just kind of stunning, I guess. You would expect the opposite. Sprinkled Donut, good to see you. I think tomorrow or Thursday for sure. The verdict, you think? Exactly. It felt fake and looked fake, but maybe it was all legit. Right. It's but I don't know. I didn't see any wet tears, even though she was going like this. But again, I didn't really zoom in. All right, let's see. Should I play some of the closing arguments, or should I play more little short clips from the trial that I think were important? This is Caitlin Albert being cross-examined by the defense about what she saw. Give me a second. I think this was also important.
Past the front lawn, correct?
Yes.
You drove past the flagpole, correct?
Yes.
And in all that time from when Tristan Morris pulled out of the driveway and drove right by your parents' front lawn, you never saw anything of the things that I previously asked you about, correct?
I did not, but I also was not looking.
You saw no baseball hat, no sneaker, no pieces of red plastic, and no 6'2" man, correct?
Correct.
And you also didn't see any tire tracks in the snow, did you?
Not that I can remember.
You drove past the front lawn, correct?
Yes.
You drove past the flagpole, correct?
Yes.
And in all that time,
Okay, so I don't want to play all of the closing arguments, especially from Lally, because it's just a bore, in my opinion. More, not as boring as his opening statements, but I do know that there was something I wanted to say specifically, and it was in his opening statements, he claims that the hit took place for John at 12:45. And then by the time he gets to his closing statements, he shifted his timeline around and moved the time to 12:30. So that is a huge red flag to me, in my opinion. I definitely think that the time, hey Sherry, good to see you. The time of him being struck shouldn't change from the beginning of the trial to the end. So I'm curious if the jury caught on to that. I think it's problematic personally, but here we go. So this is part of the Commonwealth's timeline and closing argument,
which happens to coincide with the vehicle control history database information from the Toyota text stream, which you now have up on the screen before you here, indicating that following that 3-point turn, approximately 8 minutes after that, from Trooper Paul's testimony, as far as the mileage, 36 to 38 miles, matching up with the time that the vehicle is in front of 34 Fairview Road.
Oh, really? I didn't even catch that. Yeah, let's unpack that set. Also, wasn't it only 3? I hit him, not 4 as he changed it at a closing. Wow. Yeah, it was definitely always I hit him. Very interesting and also problematic.
That the vehicle travels in reverse, in a straight line, for 24.2 miles per hour for 62.5 feet, with a minor steering angle change, which the trooper indicated was consistent with a pedestrian collision. At 12:30 a.m., you have that second triggering event 8 minutes after the 3-point turn when the vehicle is in reverse at 24.2 miles an hour. 12:35 is when the defendant calls John, and that's unanswered. 12:36 is around the time that the defendant's phone connects to the Wi-Fi at 1 Meadows Ave, Mr. O'Keefe's home.
And it was going around like wildfire that he claimed that John was hit at 12:45, and Jen McCabe claims that she saw Karen's Lexus outside in front of the house at 12:45, but yet here, and testified by the trooper, Karen's phone connects to Wi-Fi back at John's house at like 12:36. So everyone was saying, like, how is it possible that she's connecting to Wi-Fi back at John's house, and yet opening statements and Jen McCabe are claiming that Karen's Lexus is outside, and that's when this whole accident, or murder takes place, because everyone's like, that's impossible. If she's already, tapping into the Wi-Fi at home, she obviously wasn't seen at 12:45 like Jen McCabe said. And here he puts down like, oh, Jen McCabe texts John, tries calling John and gets no answer at 12:42. But he doesn't put down, after she already testified to it, and I see why he didn't, at 12:45, Jen claimed she saw her Lexus outside. And that's impossible. Karen is also leaving voicemails for John, and that is at 12:37. So she's already long gone, and yet they claim that this whole thing happened and the car was outside at 12:45. So now all the timeline's getting shifted around for closing statements.
12:37 is when the defendant leaves this voicemail. So within minutes of that vehicle's data, going 24.2 miles an hour in reverse for 62.5 feet, the defendant leaves that voicemail, seething in rage as she's screaming, "John, I fucking hate you." 12:40 to 12:42, Ms. McCabe is texting Mr. O'Keefe. She tries calling Mr. O'Keefe, gets no answer. If you recall from her testimony around this time frame, about 12:40, she was unsure whether the vehicle was actually still out front or if it had gone at that point. But she was looking for John because she had seen the defendant's vehicle in front of the house and no one had come in. So she was wondering where her friend, Mr. O'Keefe, was. 12:55, The defendant texts John, "See you later."
I think so too, Jamie. She thought he was cheating on her and not responding. Yeah. Her calling him a pervert and said something about laying next to her while he's sleeping with other women, something like that on the voicemail too. That's why she's calling. Like, she probably wanted him to go home with her, and he decides to go, into the party. There's also young girls at the party. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I think she might have been flipping out. The Commonwealth claims they were arguing anyways, so maybe that is true, but it's still, even if they were arguing doesn't mean that she hit him. And that could explain why these voicemails were left. She's upset. He got out of the car. Maybe she didn't want him to go, or she didn't want to go into the party. So yes, exactly. She was jealous, John, because John found another. She was thinking that. She seemed to be kind of a jealous person, possibly. She interpreted some flirting interaction in Aruba as him making out with a girl. That girl gets up on the stand and testified that never happened. So, she's not a perfect person. And we saw through her text messages with Higgins, like, she was flirting beyond, the realm that a girlfriend, I think, should have been flirting and speaking with another man. She kissed him. So there were things about Karen and all this that was like, that rubs me the wrong way. But I can't say that she put her car in reverse on purpose and hit him. That's just where I'm at. If you guys have a different opinion, I respect it. I totally do. It's a hard case. I really think this was a hard case to kind of find the truth where the truth lies. Yeah, it's hard to understand her messages if you haven't been there. And that's going to be hard for a lot of people. Agree. And they keep tying in, well, they were drinking, she was drinking. Well, you also say and do things when you're drinking that you normally wouldn't. And that obviously could go with both ways. Maybe she was in a rage and she did do this because she was drinking. Or maybe she just called and left those nasty voicemails because she was drinking and she went home, So there's a lot of like gray area in this case. Their relationship was toxic. And I know because I've been there. I think we've all been in a relationship that we were like lucky that we got away from. But the evidence has to support it. And it doesn't. Does that mean people lie? No. Did they not hear because of everything I mentioned? Probably. These folks collected evidence in solo cups. I can't get past that. You honestly can't make this shit up for real. I know. Another dang case of adults acting like 7th graders with real life consequences. Yes, exactly. That sums it up really well. Firefighters don't lie, especially to her celebrity ass. So the thing about the firefighters was there was somebody who testified that they didn't hear her saying those things. And then other ones that did hear it, what if they misinterpreted her saying, could I have hit him? And in their minds and in their testimony and their memory, hi, MK, good to see you. They're remembering it differently. And that's not what she was saying. Maybe she was just questioning it, like we've kind of said, like out of shock. Like Tony says, I feel she said I hit him as a question out of shock, in my opinion. I think that that's a possibility. And I think that maybe first responders were mishearing it or misquoting her. And they've kind of just stuck with what they think that they heard. They were all drinking. Right. Everybody was drinking that night and everybody was driving that night. And yet Karen's the only one who could have done this. That's the other thing that like bothers me too. It wasn't like Karen and John were the only two people who were drunk. There's a handful of people who are in and out of that house and that bar area who were drinking and equally drunk, if not more. We don't know, but yeah, surprised anyone can remember anything from that night. Agree.
12:59. The defendant calls, leaves another voicemail for Mr. O'Keefe. Exhibit 637. It sounded like this.
John, I'm here with your fucking kids. Everybody knows what the fuck you want, fucking pervert.
But somebody did know where Mr. O'Keefe was. The defendant knew exactly where he was. She had driven him there. She had struck him there. She had left him to die there. 1:02 a.m., the defendant leaves another voicemail with no content. And then she texts John, "Your kids are fucking alone." 1:09 a.m., the defendant texts John, "I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone." She's not. GPS, as far as it never disconnects from the Wi-Fi until the following morning. There's no indication that Ms. Reed left and went to her home in Mansfield at any point. 1:10 a.m., the defendant calls her parents. 1:11 a.m., she calls Mr. O'Keefe and leaves.
Okay, I just want to pause it here because he talked about how she calls her parents at 1:10 a.m. A lot of people were kind of suspicious by that, using that against her. I kind of understand it. I mean, why are you calling your parents when you're in this state of mind arguing with your boyfriend? That to me looks a little weird, in my opinion. MK says, in my opinion, this could have been an accident, except that Colin went nuts. It went too far. The dog got involved. They protected Colin, all of them, including the cops. And remember, Colin was in one of the weddings for Proctor. So they're close to the investigating officer in this. And Proctor gave Colin his police interview. So that's who handled Colin. And they never took Colin's phone and did any type of forensics on that. So as an alternative opinion, Justice Jane says, Karen did it and nobody can change my mind. Her text, her cussing mouth, and her behaviors. I'm okay with people speculating, but I'm using common sense in my opinion. And that's fine. That, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I get a little tripped up when all these people involved are butt dialing and can't remember, I don't recall, was said by a lot of these people on important incidences in this case. But on the other end, this 110 call to the parents, a little weird, don't you guys think? Yeah, that's all I'm trying to understand. Statements cannot say beyond the reasonable doubt. Right. It's like there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but if I was on the jury, would I convict this woman without any doubts in my mind? Like, I couldn't. I'd have to say not guilty because of all this other stuff kind of going around. Higgins throwing his phone out and the SIM card out on that military base. It's all just kind of weird to me. And thank you so much, Sherry. I really appreciate you for the super sticker. Appreciate that a lot. And actually, I don't know if Cold Truth is going to be watching, but she left me a super thanks, which is like a super chat after the live is over, for reading through the Madeline Soto documents. So thank you, Cold Truth. Appreciate you. He ditched her. She felt like a babysitter, which is all of his friends say now. Why wouldn't she sound mad? Plus, if you're not from the East Coast, that's how we talk. There might be some voicemails on ex-boyfriends of mine that sound similar. But again, unhealthy relationship, no doubt about that. But does that mean that she decided to end his life? I just don't know. And yeah, he did say to his friends that she was a babysitter with benefits or something like that, which is just awful. I'm feeling like the verdict will be an acquittal due to the lack of evidence. This whole case is just all over the place. Right. And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, it's going to come back to John. Who did this to John? And for some people, like Justice Jane, she says evidence shows she did it. So again, your evidence from what you said in your previous comment were her texts, her cussing mouth, and her behaviors. I don't know if that's the evidence you're still referring to, but I do just feel like certain people like you are going to be able to sleep fine if this verdict goes your way and she's found guilty. Whereas other people, I feel like, are going to be like, okay, so what happened? Because I don't believe Karen did it, and yet she's being sent to prison for this, or she's going to be acquitted, and everyone's going to be like, Karen did this, and now she's free. And there's going to be a huge portion of people like myself who are going to be like, but then who did this? Who really killed John? Because I just am not sold 100%. Getting rid of a house and a dog. Yeah. Redoing the basement where this alleged fight might have taken place. Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I mean, I really just trying to understand your opinion is your opinion, but what scientific evidence supports what you're saying? Right. Yeah, I've left voicemails like that. Hey, Valerie, good to see you. Is what Bean Bio Girl said. And you didn't kill anyone, right? We won't tell anyone.
This voicemail.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit Amy. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You're fucking another girl. Kim's sleeping next to me. You're a fucking loser. Fuck yourself.
1:18 a.m., the defendant leaves another voicemail. Now, about 1:43 or 1:45 a.m. is when Julie Nagel testified that they were leaving the house. And she sees a large black object on the lawn near the flagpole while leaving 34 Fairview Road. Doesn't think much of it at the time, isn't expecting Mr. O'Keefe or any body to be out on the front lawn. 4:42 a.m., the defendant calls and speaks. The calls to her parents are finally answered. 4:49 a.m., the defendant calls Miss Camerano, screaming, "Where's Mike?" 4:53 in the morning is when the defendant instructs Kaylee, Mr. O'Keefe's niece, to call Miss McCabe. Why? Because the defendant doesn't have Miss McCabe's phone number. Indicates that John didn't come home. We got in a fight, and I left him at the waterfall. Those are the first statements or the first version of events that she's able to communicate out to the world as to what happened to Mr. O'Keefe and where he is. We got into a fight. I left him at the waterfall. 5 a.m., the defendant calls Kerry Roberts, saying, "John's dead, Kerry, hangs up the phone.
Your niece is sleeping next to me and you're effing another girl." That pretty much explains exactly what she thought. Right. And because she thought all that, you know, does that mean she ran him over? I'm not there yet. Because I feel like possibly there's people listening or in chat who have, you know, left similar voicemails or in a situation similar. And you guys don't decide to put your car in reverse and hit somebody and kill them. But, okay, so Justice Jane says what evidence she's relying on. Eyewitness statements from the firefighters. And mind you, the firefighters come to find out, you know, like all first responders, they work closely with the police and they went to the same gym as some of these police officers who testified. Just throwing that out there. Her tail light was broken and fragments of John's body. Now, fragments of John's body, curious what you mean there. Do you mean, because as far as I know, none of his DNA besides that piece of hair was found on the car. Are you referring to like the glass and stuff that was the taillight found in his body, like in his cuts? Is that what you mean? Okay, Sherry, thank you so much for stopping in. We'll talk soon. I'll be live tomorrow night as well. Isn't there John's DNA on her vehicle? As far as I know, the only DNA was his piece of hair. There was no blood on the taillight. I know that. and there was glass in the bumper. Hair wasn't in fact there, wasn't his in fact. They're talking about trace evidence or potential touch evidence on the car. Those cuts came from the dog. There was something that had the tail light and glass fragments, I think, on, I don't know. Hopefully chat knows.
.501, the defendant calls Kerry Roberts again. And it's at this point that she indicates that John's dead. He must have been hit by a cloud. 5:07 a.m., the defendant leaves One Meadows Ave. You have the video of that. It's number 153 in Exhibit 6.
Okay, that's what I thought it was too. There was like tail light fragments in his shirt, which for somebody who trusts and has confidence in this investigation could look at it and say, see, you know, parts of the car tail light were in his shirt, you know, like that's it. But knowing how they collected this evidence, knowing how they put certain evidence in the same bag with other evidence like clothing, etc., things were cross-contaminated. Things weren't put in sterile environments. I believe his clothes were held in an officer's car or possession for a while before even being turned into a lab. There was just certain things along the way that was like, can we really trust the way this evidence was handled? And I'm under the belief that it's shoddy. It's very shoddy. And again, if I'm on the jury, can I convict this woman for life based off of how everything was handled? And you know, Proctor had his shirt for a long time though, didn't he? Yes, that's who it was.
We'll get to that a little more in a moment. About 5:10 a.m., the defendant calls Kerry Roberts. Ms. Roberts starts calling hospitals, calling KPD, calling 911. Something that you would do if you didn't know where Mr. O'Keefe was for all of these hours, that all of these other phone calls are being made and these text messages are being sent and calling your parents and all of these other things. No calls to 911 from the defendant. While John O'Keefe is laying, freezing, and dying from a brain injury and a skull fracture on the front lawn of 34 Fairview Road. 5:11 a.m., the defendant's vehicle is seen on the Canton Library camera heading towards the waterfall. Seems to be sort of retracing the steps. 5:18 a.m., the defendant's vehicle is seen at Washington Street and Chapman on the Temple Beth Abraham video, heading in the same direction that it was the night before when it was heading to 34 Fairview Road. 5:35 is when the defendant arrives at Ms. McCabe's house. Ms. Roberts arrives shortly thereafter. Both of them see the broken taillight at that time in the driveway. Now that gap of 5:18 to 5:35 is way too much time to be driving from the area of the waterfall to Jennifer McCabe's house. And as I indicated a moment before, heading in the same direction, same directionality, retracing the steps from the night before, heading towards 34 Fairview Road. Why is it that the defendant can see Mr. O'Keefe when they eventually get to Fairview Road and no one else can? It's because she knew exactly where he was. She had hit him and left him there the night before, and she had gone back during that time frame between 5:18 a.m. when she's seen on the Temple video and 5:35 when she arrives at Ms. McCabe's house.
All right. And hello, Allison and everyone else who joined. Thanks for being here. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't, if you joined us a little late. Okay, so we're going to get to the defense's closing arguments as well. I do kind of want to share, though, this testimony, just a little like recap of Kerry Roberts, because she was there when they found John. So give me a second. Just to give us a refresh before we get to the closing arguments.
House is right up here. And all of a sudden, Karen said, there he is, there he is. Let me the F out of this car. And she started kicking the door
And how was she kicking the door?
with her feet. Well, how was she kicking the door?
How hard was she kicking?
Pretty hard. I mean, she wanted to get out of the car, but it was locked because once you start driving, the back doors lock. So I looked over and I didn't see anything. And I looked at Jen and I said, she's crazy. And I unlocked the door and I sat back and watched. And she ran over to a mound of snow. At some point, I realized it was the shape of a body.
So after the defendant gets out of the vehicle, what did you do? Where did you go?
When I realized it was him or someone, I ran over and I dug his head out of the snow. Jen said my sister's house is right up.
All right. So again, that's sort of where the Commonwealth was saying, like, Karen knew exactly where to run to because she left him there. You know, it sounds compelling, but is it the truth? What do you guys think?
Look the other way. Look the other way. 4 words that sum up the Commonwealth's entire case. 4 words that sum up the hopes of those who have tried to deceive you. Conflicts of interest? Doesn't matter. Just look the other way. Magic hairs, magic glass. Look the other way. Late night calls and Google searches, falsified affidavits, inverted videos, and butt dials galore. Just look the other way. That's what they want. That's what they're counting on, but the uncontrovertible fact is you have been lied to in this courtroom. And your job is to make sure you don't ever, ever look the other way.
Oh, that's interesting too. The 911 call, if you listen to it, Jen McCabe actually states when they asked about CPR, she says they flipped him over. That wasn't consistent with any other testimony. Yeah, I never heard anybody testify that like he was on the opposite side and then they had to flip him. Very interesting.
Your singular duty is to stare down the evidence and do it unflinchingly and do it unwaveringly. You see, you're the only thing standing between Karen Read and the tyranny of injustice. It's a job you didn't ask for, probably a job you didn't want. But it's the greatest responsibility we have as citizens here in America. Lest the government stop answering to us and we start answering to the government. And woe betide any one of us who might find ourselves in the crosshairs of a Michael Proctor. Preparing for today, I was reminded of a quote. It's a quote about the truth, and I want to share it with you. It is of great importance to set a resolution never to tell an untruth. There is no vice so mean, so pitiful, so contemptible, and those who permit themselves to tell a lie once find it much easier to do it a second time and a third. This falsehood of the tongue leads to that of the heart, and in time, it depraves all its good dispositions. What does that mean? It means that it's been observed that to tell an untruth, to exaggerate, to make a false claim, it's a cancer. One lie begets another, and it's a malignancy that grows over time. And that, folks, is how a cover-up is born.
Now, I did see somebody stated in a Facebook group, I think, that they couldn't believe how hard the defense went with this whole cover-up and the closing statements, and that it was an insult to the jurors' intelligence. I don't know about that, but what do you guys think? Do you think the McAlbert's clan will be there tomorrow too? Probably. And this is a respectable question, and it's fair. Can someone explain to me why Karen Read backed up so fast? Wasn't it, refresh my memory, didn't the defense have their own expert who said that it wasn't that fast? And the Commonwealth said it was 24 miles an hour, but it was somebody else testified for the defense saying it was slower. Can't remember, so don't quote me 100%.
That's how a Massachusetts state trooper says in whispered tones to his friends when he thought no one was looking or listening, how he would make a case, how he would make it cut and dry, no matter the truth, how he would make sure to put, quote, serious charges on the girl. In other words, pin it on the girl.
Thank you.
You may ask yourself, how does this happen? How could this happen? It's 2024. Sure.
And another thing that really sticks with me is a text message from Proctor to one of his buddies. And the buddy said, oh, the owners of that house are going to catch some grief with that dead body outside. And Proctor texted him back saying, nope. So that has always stuck with me also. So if we're going to hold Karen accountable for her text messages, I can't help but look at some of the text messages from the investigating officer, Proctor, and kind of scratch my head like, okay, so it seemed like he made up his mind already that early on. Thank you, Being Bio Girl. I appreciate you. I don't feel like I'm glowing, but thank you.
Surely people aren't going to come to this courtroom, this hall of justice, and lie to us, just give us false information. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't try to cover up the truth. The Alberts,
Okay, so that nope statement was 16 hours into the investigation. Very interesting. Thank you, guys. This pregnancy, I feel it's different being pregnant with a boy than with a girl. Like, I felt like at this point when I was pregnant with my daughter, like my face had blown up and everything else. So I'm feeling different in this one. So it's good.
McCabe's, Higgins, Lank, Michael Proctor, Yuri Buchanan, Brian Tully. You don't have to wonder if they would lie to support their narrative. You need only wonder how many times they did lie. Over and over and over, they and others were caught deceiving you. Big things, small things, it didn't really matter. They feared nothing. They'll look you in the eye and deny phone calls. They'll deny secret meetings. They'll claim that calls are butt dials and butt dials are answered. They'll show you a video and tell you left is right and right is left. They'll magically turn 3 pieces of plastic into 5 right before your eyes. And even when they're caught with their own lies, they won't blink, they don't sweat. They'll just look you in the eye and demand, pay no attention. You folks look the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a cover-up in this case, plain and simple. You'll surely say to yourself, I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe that can happen in our community. But sadly, over the past 8 weeks, you've seen it right before your eyes. So how does a cover-up happen? How could that happen? Well, let's count the ways, shall we? Handpick your investigator. Make sure it's someone we know, someone on our side. Keep them close. Offer them help. Offer them a gift. Have secret friends and family meetings. Get your story straight. Delete your call history. Make mysterious phone calls at 2:22 a.m. Delete Google searches. Monitor police activity. Get rid of evidence. Get rid of your dog. Destroy your phones. Destroy your SIM card. For the investigator, decide on a narrative early on. Don't go to the crime scene. Don't take witnesses in for questioning. Question all the witnesses together. Ignore witnesses who don't fit your narrative. Allow friends and family to contact those same witnesses. Don't record interviews. Write vague and false police reports. Omit witnesses' names. Omit witnesses' interviews altogether. Don't photograph the evidence. Don't conduct any forensics. Don't document the evidence. Don't document the logs. Don't create any logs whatsoever, and don't maintain a chain of custody. Keep all the evidence in the hands of one person and then manipulate that evidence, including videos. Don't turn over videos. Invert videos. Turn 4:16 p.m. into 5:30 p.m. in affidavits. Turn 3 pieces of taillight into 5 pieces of taillight. Delete 42 minutes of surveillance footage, hide personal relationships, make this case cut and dry, and ensure the homeowner, quote, never sees any shit because he's a Boston cop. But most importantly, pick your patsy and pin it on the girl. It's not that it could happen. It's that every single one of those things I just mentioned did happen right in front of you. But this sort of injustice can't happen in a vacuum. So what about the prosecution? What about the Commonwealth? What does it look like when the government picks a narrative and then tries to form a prosecution around the narrative instead of the other way around? Looks a lot like this. If you don't have actual evidence, just throw every single thing you can against the wall to see what sticks. Drag her through the mud and make sure you attack her character. And that's what you saw in this case. The Commonwealth spent much of their time and resources trying to vilify Karen Read. They desperately resorted to calling witnesses to talk about Karen Read and John O'Keefe's arguments. They even stooped so low as to call the children and put them through this ordeal. All to say that John sometimes got upset because Karen was too kind, too nice, spoiled them too much. Their arguments illustrated what anybody could imagine is a normal set of ups and downs for any couple. Even on January 28th, they talked it out, they communicated, they worked out their issues, and they had a nice, affectionate evening out with their friends. And you don't have to take my word for it. Pull the tape, as they say. Look at the videos. C.F. McCarthy, Waterfall. What are the words that every single person who testified in this case used about Karen Read and John O'Keefe that night? Getting along, no issues, good mood, happy, affectionate, even lovey-dovey. No issues, no toxicity. They were a loving couple right up until the time Karen Read dropped him off and he walked into 34 Fairview. If an argument with a loved one is a motive for murder, folks, we're all in trouble. Speaking of which, what is the evidence that John went into the house? The Commonwealth will tell you, undoubtedly, no, he never went in the house. And they'll point to certain witnesses who they say didn't see him go in. Well, the question you have to ask yourself is, can you rely on that? First, these are all people who are related to or committed to the Alberts in some way or another. That all-powerful Canton family, it's easy to say, I didn't see something, because how can that really be challenged? Some actually may not have seen John walk into the house. They were in the kitchen, as you recall, from Nicole. Third, at least one witness, Brian Higgins, forgot his narrative, at least for a second, and he admitted a man did, in fact, come into the house. And when he was caught and asked to describe that man, he had to. It was a little bit vague. You remember what he said. He was tall, with dark hair. That was a tell.
See, that eyewitness sighting of a man tall with dark hair kind of was like, oh, that must have been John. But then I remembered John was wearing a hat that night. So this dark hair aspect of it all is just kind of puzzling to me. But Justice Jane said, it's not about the officers. It's about what Karen did. The officers are not on trial. She is. It's been nothing but distractions. The whole trial has been. We're not looking away, Karen. See, that's the thing though, is like, yes, the officers aren't on trial, but when you're an officer and you're in the responsibility of handling a murder case, everything you do will be on trial and will be questioned and cross-examined. And, so it's best to do your job appropriately in the correct way so that there isn't room for people to say, look, red Solo cups, what the heck? Look, this bloody shirt was placed in the same bag as this other piece of item, cross-contamination. Look, this text or this state trooper held on to this clothing item for a long time before handing it in. Like, there's things like that, the way that you handle the evidence. Like, yes, they're not on trial for the murder, but when you're in a position of that authority with that much responsibility handling a murder case, everything you say and do, unfortunately, will be put under a microscope. And when things aren't done appropriately, you're giving the defense room to say, this was handled poorly. How can we trust this person? Blah, 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 blah. So it's just, if you do things right, then this could have gone a totally different way. But it doesn't seem like things were done right by, people who had the authority to handle it. And his phone was under John. Yes, Commonwealth did not prove she was hit by the Karen's SUV. And I 100% agree, US. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not getting this whole her car hit him. And again, you might come back and say, but she ran him over is a theory. It was never proven. It's just what they're saying took place. You know, there's no blood on the taillight. Yes, fragments of taillight are found in his shirt, but like I mentioned earlier, that shirt wasn't handled appropriately through the command of evidence. So it leaves too much doubt. She very well could have had him. But the way that things went down, it's just unprofessional, wrong. And it leaves room for people to wonder, like, okay, so are they just trying to make up for every mistake they made and they're really set on this one theory? Do not forget, I know it wasn't allowed in court, but the grand scheme of things, yeah, there was no evidence log. Not only that, the responding officer never wrote down Karen saying, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. He only testified to that, you know, during these pre-trial hearings. So he was questioned, well, why didn't you write that down in your initial reports? So there was just things that kind of went on that was just like, ugh, this doesn't look good. They also asked that officer, so you allowed these people who were at this party to go in the house together and, you know, converse with each other and get their stories straight. Why didn't you separate these witnesses that were at this house? Or why didn't you keep them apart? Now you've almost allowed them to corroborate, you know, stories and stuff. So, and the 24 miles an hour has been, I don't want to say debunked, but the defense came out with their own expert who said, no, like it wasn't 24 miles an hour, you know, and this couldn't have projected him all the way over there. So it's just everybody has their different in opinion, and everyone took the information from the trial their own way. So actually, that was physically proven to be impossible by someone who, yeah, that's the thing is like hold on, I got his little clip. We'll get back to that. But I do think that that was another thing that was important for me to kind of reshare. The defense had their own experts who I felt were much more qualified and easier to follow. They sounded more credible. They sounded more confident. When they were cross-examined by Lally, it was sort of a joke. Like Lally didn't even know like the right ways to ask certain questions in reference to physics and stuff like that.
An hour. What is your conclusion?
Well, you're talking about significantly more kinetic energy. So if you just think about it from, again, a kinetic energy standpoint, you know, kinetic energy is equal to 1/2 times the mass and the velocity squared. So if you're squaring that velocity and you're going from 15 up to 24 miles per hour, you're going to get a significant amount of more energy associated with that. Probably, I could pull up my calculator, but you're probably looking at 2.5 more times energy than the 15 mile an hour test.
Which means 2.5 more times the damage to the taillight?
Certainly.
Which you did not see in your review of the materials, correct?
Correct.
So what is your opinion or conclusion as to whether or not the damage to the taillight was caused by striking John O'Keefe's head?
From a damage standpoint, it was inconsistent.
If you increase the speed to 24 miles an hour, what is your conclusion?
Again, some people might have listened to that guy, that expert testify for the defense and said, meh, I don't find him as credible as the Commonwealth, you know? So everyone is taking in this information their own way. I have to agree his injuries are not consistent with being hit by a car. And like I was trying to say earlier, this information wasn't allowed in the trial, but for those who follow this case, FBI did their own investigation and they pretty much said, no, not hit by a car. So take that for what you will. Everyone, again, has their own opinion, and that's fine.
slip of the tongue by Brian Higgins. But what's the real evidence of the unbiased data, the data that's not connected to the Albert family? How about John's Apple Health data? It shows that at 12:21 a.m., an important time, John arrived. That's established by the monotonic time clock you heard about in this trial. It was on his phone, and that represents a huge problem for the Commonwealth. It shows that he took 80 steps and ascended or descended 3 flights of stairs at that time. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? It matches. Walks into the house, goes directly to the basement. There's your 80 steps and your descending flights of stairs. The big problem for the Commonwealth is he wasn't outside at the car ascending and descending stairs, wasn't climbing on top of the car. So they'll tell you, wait, don't look at the Apple Health data, look at this other thing called Waze. But Rick Green explained that if you apply the 3-minute offset that is built into that monatomic time, it aligns perfectly. They don't want you to see that. They don't want you to pay attention. They want you to look the other way. But even more importantly, at approximately 12:32 a.m., someone holding John's phone takes another 36 steps and travels 25 meters. Why is that so important? Because by 12:32 a.m., Karen Read was gone. She had already left the location. She left at 12:30. Trooper Garino told you that Karen Read's phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at what time? 12:36. It is undisputed in this case that it's a 6-minute drive on a good day from 34 Fairview over to One Meadows. She was gone by 12:30, and John's phone was taking 36 steps and logging 25 meters at 12:32 after she left. So don't be fooled. John.
Yeah, that's something, MK, I just keep going back to also. Why did all these people lie so much? The phone calls, butt dials, texts all night, destroying SIM cards. Not only that, remember, more than one of them got new phones. So everyone just decided to upgrade their phone around the same time too, I guess.
Walked into that house, after which Karen drove away, and the scientific data all prove it. But also, Ryan Nagel and Heather Maxson prove it. In addition to the Apple Health data, Ryan and Heather both independently testified that they passed Karen's SUV as they drove away after talking to Julie. And Karen was alone in the SUV. John was not with her. He wasn't in the car. He wasn't standing outside the car. He wasn't sitting beside the car. He wasn't laying on the ground beside the car. He was nowhere in sight. There's only one other place that John could have been, and that's in the house. Exactly where the Apple Health data places him. So it all fits. And Ryan was right behind her, remember, staring at her taillights, undamaged, brightly lit. That brings up another difficulty for the Commonwealth, and that's their star witness, Jennifer McCabe. You'll recall that Jennifer McCabe claimed that she was looking out the door, staring at that SUV over and over and over again from 12:29 to 12:50. She was very specific about that time frame. But we know that the SUV was gone from 34 Fairview by about 12:30. Had to be in order to connect to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. So unequivocally, Jennifer McCabe was lying about watching that SUV, and it makes you wonder why. And to add to that deceit, she was also blatantly lying about the calls to John's phone. You remember that colloquy back and forth. She said that every single one of those calls to John's phone during that time was a butt dial. How are those lies connected? And why are they connected? Jennifer McCabe knows. Was she butt dialing John over and over? Or was someone looking for John's phone that went missing? Let's talk for a second about what actually happened in the time leading up to everyone going to 34 Fairview. Brian Albert, Brian Higgins show up drunk at the waterfront.
I do think another issue, and let me just show some of the crime scene images, because a lot of people in chat have the same question. I'll get back to the closing arguments too. Where's all the blood? So this is where he was laying. That's not blood, but this is the only images of blood we have. So he lost 2 liters of blood, I believe they said. And part of proving that John was in the house would have probably entailed going into the house and doing the own investigation, but that never took place. And I've heard experts state that just because John's body was found on the lawn doesn't mean that they would be allowed to go into the house and investigate without, would a judge give a warrant just because a body's found on the yard? I don't know. We will never know at this point. Some people believe, like, yes, there absolutely should have been a search of the house, etc. It just never happened. So the thing that's kind of confusing is proving that John was in the house sort of would entail going to the house, and that never happened. So it's just another type of mystery in all this is, was he really in that house? Why did they redo their basement before they sold the house? You know, they tore up the floor and redid the whole basement. Was there signs of blood in there underneath whatever, and they hid it? We just will never know.
They've been drinking in the afternoon. You know about the flirtatious texts that were sent between Karen Read and Brian. Higgins was clearly pining over Karen, but for her, the flirtation had ran its course. It was done. She was happy and committed to John. You can see that in her actions with John that night. You don't have to guess. Brian Higgins, however, you can see in his actions, he wasn't quite so satisfied and he wasn't done. His text message, well, meaning, what the hell, Karen? What about me? Seemed aggressive, seemed annoyed. He didn't like being ignored. That was pretty clear. So he's 5 or 6 whiskeys deep into the night by this time, and she continued to ignore him. Then oddly, Higgins, who doesn't know John all that well, seems to want to coax John to 34 Fairview.
And just playing devil's advocate a little bit, Justin Jane says, Mr. Allen never proved John was in the house because he wasn't. And in my opinion, the Commonwealth never proved that Karen's SUV hit John. In fact, there, you know, even I've seen somebody stated in chat, even the medical examiner couldn't determine this as being hit by a car. So if the medical examiner is not seeing it, FBI isn't seeing it, other experts aren't seeing it who testified, why would I just believe the Commonwealth? Because it's their theory. It's their theory. And I don't think that they proved it. Personally, just my opinion though. Pizza Chemist, good to see you. Gifted 5 memberships. Welcome to those members. And if you're able to thank Pizza Chemist, if you got one, then that'd be awesome. He's right, he or she is right there in chat. And thank you again. It's good to see you. Right, or any vehicle. Right, it's not even just Karen Read's car that they never proved. The experts couldn't even determine that a vehicle in general was the one that hit him. But again, everyone's got their own opinion, and the only ones that are really going to matter is going to be the jurors.
I draw your attention to the waterfall tape. If you want to take another look at it, it's at the 11:57 mark, between 11:57 and 11:58. Take a look at that tape. He's just about to leave. Higgins is just about to leave. He points over at John and he motions for him. Come on, come with me. And then at 12:20, he texts him, you coming here? This is a person he doesn't really know and didn't really talk to that entire night. Ask yourself, why was Higgins so insistent that John go to 34 Fairview that night? And then there's that sparring and fighting that he and Brian Albert were engaged in. Of all the things they could be doing, this is what they were doing just minutes before John O'Keefe walked into that house at 34 Fairview. We know that once John actually did walk in the door, it's about 2 steps, 4 feet or so, 2 steps for an adult male to reach that basement door. Remember, everybody was gathered in the kitchen. That's what Nicole Albert said. And every single witness agreed that at some point, Brian Higgins and Brian Albert left the group and went to another room. Where did they go? Where did they go together? Another important point, Chloe was not upstairs. Brian Albert slipped in one of his testimony that he provided. Quote, I was watching Chloe downstairs, monitoring her because of the other people in the house. She's not good with strangers. Remember that testimony.
And remember, we also heard that Chloe had to be given away because she actually did bite people. Like, that dog had a history of biting people. So keep that in mind.
So what happened next? We absolutely know that John was in the house. The data, Ryan, Heather, they all established that. We know that John ascended or descended stairs. We know that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert excused themselves. How long does it take to have a crossword? How long does it take to have a fight? How long would it take for Brian Higgins to say to John, you know, your girl's been texting me? A push, a punch, a fall, pull Chloe off his arm, and now it's done. What is that? 5 seconds? 10? Doesn't take long at all.
And that's the thing too, which we've stated before, this whole her texting Higgins, you know, it definitely comes into play, I think, in the whole story. And this is where it's kind of like Karen could be responsible for what happened in a way of, if she had never texted Higgins, there never would have been an alleged fight. But that doesn't mean that she's, you know, going to have to go away for prison the rest of her life. That's how I see it. I think that it definitely could have been possible that John went in there ready to confront Higgins, or Higgins was ready to tell John, like, look at this. Oh, by the way, we kissed, you know, and all this stuff could have happened with people drinking. Yeah, lots of drinking that night by everybody. Exactly. And who knows, you know, what type of guy Higgins really is. Like once he realized, because let's face it, he got played by Karen. He, I think, was excited. Excuse me. He was excited about, you know, her texting him and being interested in him. And then once he realized that, you know, she was just playing him and she's going back to her other relationship with John, who knows how he would have been able to handle that, you know, rejection in a way. So was there a fight? I think it's possible. Right. And that's the thing with alcohol involved. You really can't say that people don't fight when they're drinking. They do. Yeah, I won't lie. I pulled a Karen like Higgins before too. And I think that that's the thing is like, you know, other women have as well. Other people in general have been on both sides of it. You know, they lead somebody on or they were the person being led on. So you can kind of see how this could have backfired once John is at the house, possibly. You know, Higgins probably asked where Karen was and set John off. Could be. I've also theorized maybe John saw text messages, even him saying to Karen that night, well, you know, maybe he's seen that. And he's like, what the hell is this about? Because Karen was driving. Maybe he's seen it on her phone or something. Or, you know, it was a notification like on the front of the phone that popped up, kind of like this one, only it's not a text. And he's like, you know, whose number is that? Or why is this person saying, well, oh, it's Higgins? All right. Gets out of the car and goes after Higgins, but somehow Colin gets involved. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibilities. And think about it too. When Higgins testifies and he says, well, I was at the police station moving cars. It's on video. Just way too convenient of an alibi, in my opinion.
And then the panic sets in. It wasn't intended to go that far, but what's done is done. And then some very, very odd things start happening at the Albert household. Very odd indeed. What do we know? We know through the testimony and key swipes that Brian Higgins very oddly goes directly to Canton Police Department. Why would he do that? After a night of drinking and partying, why go to CPD when you're drunk? What was so important there? He couldn't even get his own story straight. First, he said it was administrative work. Then he said he was moving cars. Then he said it was a factor of both. Is it both? Was it neither? Or was he there to gather intel? Ask yourself, why go?
Right. Opinionated said she may have thrown it up to John to get his attention. Right. Maybe they were arguing and she didn't want him to go into that party, or she suspected he was cheating. And she's like, okay, have fun. By the way, look at this. And shows John a text message from Higgins. Oh, yeah, he's interested in me. Just thought you should know. He says I'm hot, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? I mean, they're in this heated argument, it seems, based off of the theory of the Commonwealth and the fact that she left those angry voicemails. Like something was going on. You know, she's claiming that he's cheating on her in those voicemails, but maybe there was some type of tip off about Higgins. Like, we just don't know, I guess.
But the odd things keep piling up, and here's another. Chloe was the Albert family pet. Not only did she appear to be gone from the house that morning on January 29th, nobody saw her there. Even Jen McCabe admitted, I didn't see her there. But they actually got rid of the dog altogether. Within months of this incident, the dog was gone, out of the house, rehomed, never to be seen again. This was a dog they had had for 7 years. Also a dog who had a bite history. Why was it so important to get rid of that dog? Was there something about the dog they did not want law enforcement to find out? Recall what Dr. Russell said. She's seen up to 1,000 animal attacks. In her expert opinion, John's right arm, those injuries are from an animal, quote, most likely a large dog. And Dr. Russell's testimony, I'll remind you, was undisputed by any witness for the Commonwealth.
The dog theory, the scratches, I mean, that's still very debatable in a lot of chats and Facebook groups and all that. I can say, though, in my opinion, they look more like animal bites than they look like a car hit him. That's just my opinion. You guys let me know your thoughts.
But there are more odd and unexplained things. After a night of drinking and hanging out and partying, after being together for the entire day, at 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert decides to call Brian Higgins. That call was missed. 17 seconds later, Higgins calls Brian back, and they speak for 22 seconds. Now, that call is odd and suspicious enough, and just in and of itself, the fact that the call was made. But what's even more incriminating is that both men, both of them, lied about the calls happening. They both claim astonishingly that those calls are, you probably say it with me, they're butt dials. Amazing. But Albert and Higgins take it a step further. Not only did they claim that they were making calls as butt dials, but they were answering calls as butt dials. And Higgins seemed awfully defensive about that call, didn't he? Remember on cross-examination when I was asking him, can you have a conversation in 22 seconds? He unequivocally said, no, that's impossible. It's not reasonable. You can't do it. Well, let's test that out. Hey, did you make it over to Canton? Yep. Haven't been any calls. Nobody knows a thing. All right, don't talk to anybody until we talk again. Okay, fine. And by the way, come back over. I need help moving something heavy. How long did that take? 15 seconds? Maybe? But the odd behavior isn't done yet. 5 minutes after that call that we just talked about, Jennifer McCabe is on her phone at her house, Google searching how long it takes for someone to die in the cold. That was at 2:27 a.m. That timeline seems to fit, doesn't it? And it fits a very telling and a very clear story. That search became a focal point of the Commonwealth's entire case. This case was starting to look a lot more like the defense of Jennifer McCabe than anything else. That's probably because there is no innocent explanation for that Google search at 2:27 a.m. None. At the end of the day, clearing away all the confusion, the Commonwealth's experts were left with two things that are true. First, neither of their experts could absolutely rule out that Jennifer McCabe made that search at 2:27 a.m. Neither. And second, the only person to use the actual phone model, the actual data, and the actual precise operating system was Rick Green. And he was clear. That search was at or before 2:27 a.m. And then it was deleted. So what else was going on at or around this same time when all this suspicious activity was happening at the Albert house and the McCabe house? 3 minutes after that search and 8 minutes after the Albert Higgins 2:22 a.m. call, Brian Loughran drives down the street in his snowplow. And he told you that there is no body laying on the lawn at 34 Fairview at 2:30 in the morning. Importantly, he didn't just simply say he didn't see a body, he wasn't paying attention. He said there was no body there. He knows the property, he knows the owners, he's grown up with these folks, he passes by all the time, not once, not twice, 3 passes. There was no body on that lawn, period, at 2:30 a.m.
All right, so just catching up in chat. Sorry, and I believe the 2:27 Google search. I personally believe that it was at 2:27. And like he said, the other experts for the Commonwealth couldn't say 100% that it wasn't 2:27. So yeah, that hypothetical 20-second call was brilliant. Right. I mean, you can have a meaningful conversation in 22 seconds. A conversation can be had in that short amount of time that could have huge ramifications or dominoes effect. The purple one, good to see you. And I just seen, I think the other day, that they said it is 40 years for Prince's album. I forgot. I think it was like the anniversary or something. Sorry if this was said, but the tip off for me was the black and white 30-ish second video from the bar where Brian Higgins was seen pointing where Karen and John were appearing to be challenging him. Yeah, a lot of people, zoomed in on that and thought that there was strange body language in that as well. And as far as who would play AJ in a movie, and I think, unfortunately, he's much older now, but back in the day, like Fatal Attraction time, couldn't you see Michael Douglas playing him? Just saying. If this was an older Michael Douglas, or I mean, if this was a younger Michael Douglas, I feel like he would be a good AJ in a movie.
And what other suspicious thing happened that night? By 3:30 a.m., someone moved a Ford Edge in front of the very area that would obstruct the view of where John's body would ultimately be discovered. Who's the only person in this case that you've heard about with Ford Edge? Brian Albert. Remember, as you're thinking about this, the basement at 34 Fairview is serviced by a bulkhead. It's a quick and convenient door to the backyard. And that backyard is serviced by a side fence. And that side fence is easily accessible to the front yard at the side of the house. Which side of the house? The side where John's body was found. And by 6 a.m., John's body was, in fact, now outside. While this flurry of suspicious activity was going on with the Alberts and the McCabe's, what's happening with Karen? All she knows at this point, think about it, at approximately 2:21, she dropped off John, he walked into 34 Fairview, and that's all she knows. She knows nothing else that was going on. So what was she left to think? He goes in to check the party out, but all of a sudden he's not coming back. He's not responding. Minutes start to pass. 1 minute turns to 2, 2 turn to 10. Where is he? Why isn't he responding? She's sitting in the cold, dark, freezing outside in the car. Naturally, she's perturbed. Being perturbed turns into being peeved. And being peeved eventually turns into being pissed. By 12:30, Karen's mad. She's left 34 Fairview to make a point, but she's still texting and calling. What could she reasonably be thinking at this point? What's going through her mind? 12:33 turns into 12:34. I can't believe he'd do this to me. 12:34 turns into 12:35. Where is he? Why aren't you answering, John? 12:35 turns to 12:36. Jesus Christ. I'm calling and you're not answering. Where are you? Pick up the phone. But there's still no answer. There's still no response. By 12:37, she's getting furious. She does not know that something has happened to John. She does not know that. So she leaves the first angry voicemail. Illustrates frustration, aggravation, all the normal responses anybody might have, you and I might have. But little did she know. The next open voicemail has Karen parking at John's garage after she gets home. You can hear her heels clicking across the garage floor. For all she knows at this point, John's just drunk, he's been partying, he's hanging out, just forgot about her, blowing her off. But John's still not responding, and as the minutes tick by, Karen becomes increasingly upset. Those are the voicemails that you heard. How could he do this? Why is he ignoring me? Why is he ignoring the kids? Those are the thoughts bearing down on Karen Read as she sat in an empty house late at night by herself. Ladies and gentlemen, she did not know what had happened to John. But within the next voicemail, you quickly learn what she was thinking and what she was feeling. Now it's 5:23 a.m. She's woken up. She's realized that he hasn't come home and he hasn't responded to a single text, not a single call. And anger quickly turns to panic and abject fear. She's so distraught, she reaches out to him again. John, where the fuck are you? She says through tears and desperation. And at 6:03, the question was answered and her worst fears are realized when she finds his body laying, dying in the cold in Brian Albert's front yard. You heard her. You can feel the grief. You can feel the raw anguish. You can see it. You don't have to wonder the emotional journey that Karen traveled that night. You can see it in the video. You can hear it in the audio. From the time he left her and walked into 34 Fairview and she called, she reached out 53 times. She called him 53 times before finding his body. Think about that. The Commonwealth wants you to believe that she murdered this man. And then after that murder, she called him not once, not twice, 53 times. It makes no sense. What does make sense is that she emotionally moved from anger, then to panic, then to grief. So back at 5:07, when she began her search looking for John, she backed out of the garage, and what would happen next would change the entire course of this case. As she backed out of that garage, she hit John's Traverse and cracked her right rear taillight. Folks, the Commonwealth has one job to do in this courtroom. It's an immutable responsibility to provide you with the truth. That's it. Not to win the case, but to seek justice and to do it through the truth. Ask yourself, did you get that truth from the Commonwealth? The Commonwealth continually tried to tell you that that video showed that the SUV came close to John's Traverse, and it took us showing you the video to unequivocally establish that Karen hit that car and cracked her taillight at 5:07. You can almost hear an audible gasp in the courtroom when we finally showed you the actual video. You can see that tire move. I'm only going to show you one series of exhibits during my entire closing, but it's that important. And it's this. Look at the condition of her taillight when she pulls out of the driveway at 5:07. That taillight, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. That taillight is cracked, but it's not completely damaged. And if there was any question in your mind about the level of damage to that taillight at 5:07, all doubt was extinguished. When Dighton Police Officer Barrows walked into this courtroom, he's a sworn officer. He's not associated with Kenton. He's not associated with the Alberts. He's not associated with the McCabe's. He doesn't know Michael Proctor. In other words, he doesn't answer to any of these folks. He's an outsider and he's completely independent. And his words were the following, quote, "That taillight was not completely damaged. It was cracked. A piece was missing, but not completely damaged." Take a look at this photograph and tell me, which one looks like Officer Barrows' description? The one on the left or the one on the right? The reconstructed light on the left is what that light looked like before it was in Trooper Proctor's possession. Remember that. That's what it looked like before Trooper Proctor had access to the SUV. And you have an independent police officer telling you so. You'll recall that after John's body was discovered, Lank, a very good friend of the Alberts, walked into Brian Albert's house and had an off-the-record meeting with him. No one's ever going to know exactly what that meeting was about, what they discussed, because that interview, like everything else in this case, it wasn't recorded. It wasn't memorialized. But we do know that shortly thereafter, the Canton Police Department was recused from the matter entirely. And the case was assigned to one Michael Proctor. You have to believe that when the Alberts found that out, they thought they hit the lottery. They thought they hit the lottery. What are the chances? The department where my brother works, that would have been great to investigate this case, but that department's been recused. That's tough luck. But the guy who catches the case is Michael Proctor, a guy we go back with for decades. At such a break, they probably thought, when this is over, we need to get that dude a gift. Oh, wait a minute. They didn't think that. They said it out loud. But still, you've got to imagine that the Alberts had to be stressed, what with that whole thing about a dead body being on their lawn. That might get some attention. And they had to be wondering, will he set up a crime scene? Is he going to come into the house? Is he going to search the house? Is he going to send in a forensics team? Is he going to interview witnesses? Is he going to take us to the station? Will he take our phones? Will he look at our communications? Will he look at our Google searches? Will he look at our early morning phone calls? Is he going to look in the basement? And Michael Proctor answered every single one of those questions resoundingly. Nope. He's a Boston cop too. And with that, Michael Proctor didn't draw a thin blue line. He erected a tall blue wall. A wall that you can't scale. A wall that Karen Read certainly couldn't get over. A wall between us and them. A place you folks are not invited. We protect our own. It's us or it's them. And by the way, who's she after all? Nobody. An outsider. This is going to be easy. Or so they thought. Let's look at what Michael Proctor actually did and did not do in this case. One of the consistent issues that's come up throughout this trial is how evidence always seems to be changing and evolving when in Michael Proctor's hands or somebody in his orbit. If it happens once, let's chalk it up to a mistake. Twice, it's starting to look a little bit like incompetence. If that happens every single time, it becomes intentional, which means it becomes corruption. The defense spent some time, we spent some time discussing the tow time that Michael Proctor swore to in affidavits. There was a reason that we believed it was so important, and I want to talk about it.
All right, so I'm going to skip a little bit to like the last 15 minutes, just so we can end things on like a 2-hour mark. Even with the pillow, My back just starts to hurt. Sorry, guys.
Go back and watch the Sally Port video. I'll give you the timestamp, 5:37, and see it for yourself. We know that Trooper Proctor, with binder in hand, walked by himself. Once we corrected the video from being inverted, you can see that he walked back by himself to the right rear tail light where nobody could see what he was doing. Higgins' own key swipes put him in the Sally Port that same afternoon and evening. And then the Sally Port video magically skips and Chief Berkowitz appears right next to Proctor at the back of that vehicle in the same spot, and they walk out of the Sally Port together. Where were they going? Remember O'Hara? Unidentified troopers and Canton cops were at the search at 34 Fairview. How hard is it to drop a piece of plastic? We spent a long time talking about the compromised and altered and tampered and manipulated evidence, and now I want to switch and talk a little bit about the true facts in this case, because you did hear some true evidence and true facts. The Commonwealth presented about 67, maybe more, witnesses and expended 30 plus days of trial and 9 weeks of your life. Maybe we're in the 10th week. For what? It should be relatively simple, right? The Commonwealth claims that Karen Read pulled up to 34 Fairview, John got out of the car, she reversed into him and hit him, and then she drove home. That's 4 facts. It's just 4 facts. That's all it is. What evidence do they actually have to prove that that SUV ever hit John? The answer is none. They don't have any. There's no evidence whatsoever that Karen Read's vehicle ever struck John O'Keefe or that Karen Read ever wanted to strike John O'Keefe. In fact, every single piece of material evidence in this case unequivocally proves the opposite. John went into that house. That SUV was not damaged by hitting John, and John's injuries did not come from being hit by a car. That's what the evidence actually shows. The Commonwealth knows that, and they've known it for a long time, and Proctor knows that. And because of that, the Commonwealth just resorts to character assassination and talking for weeks on end about the snow. Let's talk about what the real evidence actually shows, the unassailable science. Let's talk about the truth. Concerning John's injuries first, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, Dr. Scorty Bello, could not conclude that John was hit by a car. Think about that. And she would not even say that it was a homicide. She told you without any dispute in this case, quote, evidence pointing toward one manner of death is no more compelling than evidence of a competing manner of death, end quote. Her words, not mine. She went on to say it's just as likely that he was punched and fell backward. His injuries are consistent with that. In fact, in her expert opinion, his injuries are consistent with a physical altercation, as she testified, but they are not, in her words, not classical injuries from an auto pedestrian accident. That by itself is reasonable doubt. But the evidence and the truth goes far further. We introduced you to not one, but 2 thoroughly credentialed medical examiners or medical experts, Dr. Sheridan and Dr. Russell, both of whom said John's arm injury is consistent with an animal attack. Dr. Russell studied, diagnosed, and treated up to 1,000 animal wounds. She's an expert in animal wounds, and she was unequivocal. Those wounds are from an animal, likely a large dog, which means that John was attacked inside the home where Chloe was. There is no other possibility. And Dr. Sheridan, for his part, with thousands of 13,000 autopsies under his belt, decades of experience as the chief medical examiner who's triple credentialed in anatomical, forensic, and neuropathology, he told you that John's injuries are inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident or incident. They're consistent, however, with a physical altercation. In layman's terms, the science proves John was beaten. That also is reasonable doubt and should end this case. But the facts and evidence don't stop there. 2 of the most highly educated and highly qualified engineers you'll ever meet, Dr. Dan Wolf and Dr. Andrew Rinchler, mechanical engineer and a biomechanist. They reviewed this case. They did testing, they did analysis, they evaluated the case scientifically. They were not hired by the defense, not by the Commonwealth. They're completely 100% independent of any party in this case. And they were equally available, by the way, to the Commonwealth. They could have called them. They explained that John's injuries were not caused by being hit by Miss Read's SUV, and that the SUV was not damaged by coming in contact with John O'Keefe's body. That should end the inquiry right there. Both sides of the equation. From a physics, engineering, and biomechanical standpoint, they established that John O'Keefe was not struck by Karen Read's vehicle, period. And that is yet another fact that establishes reasonable doubt and should put an end to this case. So instead of calling the ARCA experts, which they had available to them, the Commonwealth chose to introduce you to Trooper Joe Paul. You'll remember his testimony. I think I'm being kind when I say that Trooper Paul's analysis lacked credibility. Trooper Paul lacks the experience, the education, the training, the background, and the knowledge to not only render opinions on these issues, but to even understand the issues themselves. He makes the absurd claim that John was hit on the elbow area of his arm by a taillight. He was spun to the left in a pirouette. His arm stayed on the light long enough for the shards of plastic to explode around him, scratching his arm even though he was wearing long sleeves, then projecting him 30 feet to the left, but not before making a stop to hit his head on either the curb or the pavement, before coming to his final resting place with his unbroken phone tucked neatly under his body. It's nonsensical. It borders on laughable. Compare that testimony to Dr. Dan Wolf and Dr. Andrew Rinchler, both PhDs in engineering, both top of their field in accident reconstruction, both published peer-reviewed articles on the issues. Both men are highly sought after by the likes of national sports leagues and the United States Department of Defense, and these men are unrivaled in accident reconstruction. What did Dr. Rinchler say before he left the stand? This was even under cross-examination. He said that the physics and the science don't lie. His words were, "You can't deny the science and the physics." John wasn't hit by that car, period. The Commonwealth cannot explain John O'Keefe's injuries. They can't explain his head wound. How did he get the head wound if he landed on snow-covered grass and dirt? And by the way, before Mr. Lally gets up and says it, because I know he's going to, there is zero evidence before you, zero, that cold grass and dirt turns into ice or turns into concrete. Zero. They can't explain the injury above his right eye, that laceration. They can't explain his nose. They haven't even tried to. They can't explain the injury to his tongue, the laceration on his tongue. They cannot explain the injuries to his back, to the back of his hands, the bruises, and certainly they cannot explain the injuries to his right arm. But maybe most importantly, they cannot and haven't even tried to explain the lack of injuries on John's body from the neck down. Nothing. He was pristine. Not a bump, not a bruise, not a fracture, not a broken bone. Nothing to suggest that he was hit by a 7,000-pound SUV going 25 miles per hour. And what of that right arm? According to the Commonwealth's best and brightest, Trooper Paul, John absorbed the entirety of the collision, the whole collision, with that 3.5-ton SUV entirely with his right arm, launching him some 30 feet. But amazingly, the arm suffered no break, no fracture, and didn't even get a bruise. So how are those injuries properly explained? The evidence is simple. John got into an altercation. He was punched. He tried to defend himself by putting his hands up. He may have even scratched his own nose by putting his hands in front of his face to defend himself. His hands were bruised and covering up.
5 minutes, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. As he continued, he got hit, punch went through, and he fell to the ground, fracturing his skull. At some point during that altercation, the dog got a hold of him, and the dog was pulled away. Every single injury is answered. Every single injury is explained by that. Ladies and gentlemen, given what we know about the facts and the physical evidence in this case, the actual truth in this case, how did this happen? How did we end up here? We ended up here because of relationships, insider trading, playing the who you know game, and building a tall blue wall, which takes decades and generations. But the real question is it going to continue? Will this festering malignancy that allows a lead detective and his supervisor to gloat and sneer while looking over naked pictures or looking for naked pictures of the woman that they've targeted, will that continue? And the answer should be, not if you have anything to say about it. Michael Proctor is the lead investigator in this case, and much as the Commonwealth might try, they cannot distance themselves from the stench of him on this case in this investigation. Those secret group chats illustrate the quality and character of his investigation. Remind yourself how, quote, unbiased and an objective investigator, someone who's supposed to be looking for facts. Ask yourself, how did he approach his job late at night, sitting there in his office, deviously looking for naked pictures of Karen Read and talking about her like she's a piece of meat, talking about her bodily functions, her medical conditions, calling her vile names. I don't even have it in me to repeat what he said about her. He reduced her to an object, and he went further by insulting her. He went further than insulting her, and he dehumanized her. And when he was done betraying that very humanity, he wished for her to commit suicide. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you frame someone. That's how you dehumanize someone so viciously that you can just pin it on the girl and cover for the homeowner because he's a Boston cop. That's how you rip a person's life apart and sleep like a baby while doing it. And then further that by saying, I hope she kills herself. Ladies and gentlemen, I just began the discussion this afternoon or this morning with a quote about the truth, and I did that because that's what this case is about, top to bottom, tip to tail. It's about the truth, not hiding it or concealing it, but exposing the truth. The truth is immutable. It's not a feeling, it's not a whim. It's unflinching, it's unchanging, and it's everlasting. That's why the law is steady. That's why it's not captive to the whims of people drunk with power who think they're above the law, who think they're above scrutiny. That's why you stand as the guardian of justice and the protector of justice. The law demands the very integrity that Trooper Proctor and his investigation lacks, and it requires that you cannot convict Karen Read unless the Commonwealth has met its incredibly high burden to prove every element beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And a moral certainty is defined as the highest degree of certainty possible in matters related to human affairs. It's the highest degree possible in your life. That's the level of certainty. And I'll leave you with this. You have the most powerful tool known to American jurisprudence because you have your vote. No one can take that away from you, not me, not the Commonwealth, not the court. You may not have asked to be here, but each of you have given something very special of yourselves. You've agreed to do that, which is the highest calling a citizen can answer in any way. You've agreed to give your community your best. And my question to you is, what will you do with this moment? Ignore the lies, the manipulations, the misogyny, the bias, the lack of evidence? Could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Or will you say with your verdict, I see the truth, and I will not ever look the other way? When you stare the truth down, you'll see that the Commonwealth has not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt into a moral certainty, not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Read is innocent. Do justice and find her not guilty. Thank you.
All right. Again, there was more in between there that we skipped over. So if you want to watch it all, it's obviously here on Court TV and other places have it as well. Tony says, I feel they're all in it together and everyone had a role. I could definitely see that. I wonder if the jury will too. I find it interesting why Brian Alberts, Jen McCabe, and Colin present other than Proctor, right? They are the other three that allegedly have a lot on the line. Yeah. And it's like they want to be there to, I don't know, maybe look at the jury, intimidate the jury, or I heard that Jen McCabe was staring down Karen. I don't know. But thank you so much for the super chat. And thank you, Pizza Chemist. And I know Sherry left to go to bed earlier, but thank you all. Nelson says best defense closing argument I've seen was really good. It definitely was. Definitely better than Lally. And that's not just me saying it. I know that there's a lot of people who have watched even more trials than I have who were just kind of, he's a snooze fest. He really is. And I've seen people say when Lally talks, it's like the grown-ups talking on Charlie Brown. And that's what he sounds like. And besides him being dull and boring, the Commonwealth just never proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, I know that there's people who are saying, they found the taillight in his clothing and she knew exactly where he was on the yard when she went the next morning because she left him there. The shoe was off. So he was hit by a car. There's things like that people are saying, Karen's guilty because of those things. But in my opinion, I still am like, well, what about the butt dials from all those people? What about everyone getting a new phone? What about Higgins trashing his SIM card and his phone on the military base? What about them getting rid of Chloe and selling the house, remodeling the basement? Colin's knuckles that have the scrapes on them. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that kind of am like, yes, I can see what you guys are saying. Karen calls her parents at 1:10 in the morning, kind of a strange time to call your parents. Was she, concerned and saying like, oh, I did something, I need your help. Like, I don't know. But there's other things surrounding all this. That's like, why did they all lie about certain things? Why, when Jen McCabe is on 911, does she say there's a man out in the snow? Pretty much speaking of John as if she never knew him, and he's not an officer out in the snow. It's just some man. It was just a lot of distancing language being done by people in this case too, surrounding this case. The butt dial during sex from one of them. It's just not making a lot of sense. Thank you, Pizza Chemist, for gifting 5 more memberships. Welcome to those members. I appreciate you guys all being here. Hopefully, if available, Valerie and Jay, maybe if they come up or when they come up with the verdict, if you guys want to talk and do a live stream panel to kind of discuss everything that was decided, let me know. I do want to dig into, what was I wanting to do? There's a few other live streams this week I want to cover. You guys let me know what you think about going over for the Sebastian Rogers case, Nina's interview, who was Chris Proudfoot's ex-wife. We never went through it here on this channel. I want to keep Sebastian's name and face out there, but there's no new information coming out from law enforcement, so it's kind of hard to do so. But I still think that it's a case that I want to keep covering. I do have Micah Miller's autopsy stuff to go through if you guys were interested in that. I know people are asking for another Watts live, a deep dive. So maybe we can do that this week. Just other things I want to do probably will be live every night this week. So join me around this time. Anywhere from 7 to 9 o'clock is when I'll start going live. 7:30 usually. If it's that early. No, she just called him saying John's not here. Right. Interesting butt dials. I believe it that all I get anymore. No one on the other end. All right, guys. I'd be interested in Sebastian. Okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, Chris Watts. Yeah, we'll be digging. We're still going through his FBI interview, so there's still a lot to unpack there in our deep dives. Again, not an open case, but a case that's very popular that you guys like to do. Sebastian is making me crazy wondering where that angel is. I know. And I don't want it to just go away. So I don't know. If we can do a deep dive on Nina's statements when she was married to Chris Proudfoot, I think that that's sort of a way to kind of keep the case alive a little bit. Again, we don't want it to go cold. So, and I appreciate you guys so much, the moderators, everyone in chat, the members, people who donated. Okay, sounds good. Yes, I will put it in chat. All right, guys. So appreciate you guys. See you tomorrow night around this time. So more explosion theory deep dive. Oh, gosh. I did find something interesting recently, Nell. Since our last Watts deep dive, I did find more circumstantial evidence to support the explosion theory. So I know people kind of are like, oh, I'm not on board with that. But I'm telling you, there's something else in the discovery files that play along with that theory. So I'm going to show you guys that when we go live this week on the Watts. But appreciate all the moderators. Like I said, we'll talk very soon. Well, tomorrow night. So join me tomorrow night. I don't know what case it'll be. It'll be kind of a surprise. But yes, I'll see you guys then. And again, thank you very much. Hit that like button and bye-bye.